Well, hello, AP students. This is Mr. Holmes Williams, and I'm going to show you the CSS styling lesson that we participated in within class that you may have missed or that you may need a little bit of assistance on. So let's go ahead and get started now. Now, if you are inside of my APCSP class, I have a direct link to this assignment within the February 12th announcement. So if I click here, you go directly to the assignment and you have a pop-up that looks like this. However, if you are not in my class and you are in either Ms. Calhoun's or Mr. Wynn's class, you can go over to your Code HS, go within your class, and then at the top, we have our HTML and CSS practices and assignments. Go to lesson 6, and then you can click on this lesson right here called CSS, Multimedia, and Semantic Tags Example. I'm not going to click on that because that actually has my finished code in it. I'm going to instead use this link. Now, when you are presented with this link, you will have this pop-up that comes up, and it kind of gives you an overview over what the lesson is going to be covering. We'll go through everything in due time, but I did want you to click on the finished site example so you can get a feel as to how this website is going to look once we have applied some CSS styling to everything. So we have a little bit of a Rickrolling effect right here, but as you can see here, our website has color, we have changed the color of the background, we've moved some elements around, and so all of this is done using the power of CSS. And so we're going to show you what that looks like today. But first, we have to deal with good old-fashioned HTML. So let's get started. And let's just be reintroduced to our Code HS window. On the side, we have all of our files, which have been pre-populated for you, so you don't have to do anything. We're going to collapse this a little bit. In the middle, you have your code editor, and then on the side, you have a preview of your code. Now, what I will say is, instead of previewing your code in this small window right here, I want you to put your window inside of a new tab, and anytime we make changes to our HTML or CSS, we will refresh this page, and it will then give us the preview or the live version of what we've done, okay? So let's go ahead and move this out the way so that we have full centered attention on our code. First off, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And now let's just do a little bit of analysis. So first off, looking at our website, we have a very basic website right now with just HTML code, no CSS. And within this website, we have 3 pages. We have our main page, we have our HTML resources page, and we have our CSS resources page. Okay, and if you look at the code, you will see how I have structured this website. Also on every page, we have a link to an image up at the top that will then, if you click on it, link back to your main page. Okay, now going back to the finished website, I did want to do just a little bit of a quick overview of what we're actually trying to do here. So one of the things you're going to learn today in HTML is something called semantic tags. And semantic tags inside of HTML are basically tags that tell you and the browser what materials or what elements you are trying to group together within a particular semantic tag. So for example, up at the top, we have the header element, which is comprised, of course, with the opening header tag and the closing header tag. Down here, we have our nav element, and then here we have our main element inside of this beautiful teal. On the side, we have our aside element, and then we have some other elements that we have on here. And at the very bottom, we have our footer element. And so if you look at your code, right, you can see that we have essentially placed all of our text within one of those 4 or 5 categories. So within body, we have our header, that's your first semantic element, our nav, that's our second semantic element, our aside, that's our third semantic element, our main, with a whole bunch of text, that is our 4th semantic element, and then our 5th with our section, and then our 6th. Now, I might have just miscounted that. I'm not a math teacher, I'm a computer science teacher, so forgive me if I skipped a number or 2. But as you can see, there is nothing on our page that isn't contained within one of these semantic elements. And again, they don't do anything per se, but what they do is they group code together that is going to be stylized similarly, which is why when you look up here at our website, right, everything within each of those elements have been stylized to have a similar styling. Okay, so it is a way to group elements together that you want to have a similar style. Now that we have that out the way, let's talk about one version of CSS. So there are 3 versions of CSS. We're only going to discuss 2 today because one is kind of repetitive. The first one we're going to talk about is Inline CSS. So if we go up to line number 34 on your HTML page, the index.html page, you will see that we have an attribute called style, and then we have our typical styling of attributes, which is style equals something in quotes. And within the quotes is where we're going to put in some CSS code. And in this case, we are specifically only styling the H1 element that has the main page text within it. So the way that you write CSS code, and this is for inline or the other type of CSS we're going to be doing, which is external, is that you do a property colon a property value and then a semicolon. So for example, if I want to change the color of our main page text to pink, I would do color colon pink semicolon. So now when I save my code, I go up to my website and I refresh my page. Now my main page is a beautiful pink. Great. The semicolon is there because semicolons denote the end of a statement. So we are done with this property and property value duo. So now we're going to go to a next one. Let's add in a background color to complement this beautiful pink. So let's do background dash color colon, and then again, just like with color, we give it a property value. Now, you can add color to your page in 2 ways. You can either call the color by name or you can add in a hex code, right? So one of the resources we gave you was on your CSS resources page. So if you scroll down to the resources, you do have in your 4th bullet point, we have the HTML and CSS colors list. Now this is not all the colors you can add on your page, but these are some of the ones that you can either call by name, like I can call dark khaki or dark magma by name, or I can use the hex color. So I'm going to use dark magma's hex color instead of calling dark magma by name. Go back and I'm going to paste that in here. I'm going to save it. And now when I refresh my page, go to the top, well, go back to my main page. And now we have a pink text color on top of a dark magma background. Awesome. Let's go back. So those are 2 properties and property values. Let's talk about another one. So add our semicolon at the end of our background color combination CSS code. Now we're going to do text dash align. And if you're thinking, well, what does this do? Well, it aligns your text either to the left, to the center, or to the right of your page. The default text alignment of text is, of course, left adjusted. So I want to center the text on the page. So I'm going to put after my colon for my property value, center, and then a colon to end that statement. Save that. And now we go, we refresh, and now our main page text is centered. The last thing we're going to do, actually no, the second to last thing we're going to do is add in our font size. So we want to change the size of the font to make it bigger so that it is more noticeable. So we change font size by using font dash size. That's our property, colon. Now we give it a pixel amount to then alter the size, either lower or higher. In this case, I'm going to use a higher number than what it is. So I'm going to use 60 pixels because I know 60 pixels is pretty high. Add in my semicolon. I'm going to save this. And now I'm going to refresh my page. And you can see that we now have a 60-point font main page text. Finally, we are now going to add in a border around our H1 element. Okay, so the way that you add borders in CSS is by using the border selector, not border selector, sorry, border property, do your colon, and once you have completed your colon, this is actually what we call a combination property, meaning that it can take more than one property value. In this case, the border property allows you to have 3 different property values. In this case, you can change the color, so I'm going to make the color yellow. And then to type in the next property value, you put a space. Then you can also do the weight of the border. So in this case, I'm going to do 10 pixels, space, and you can put in the last one, which is the type of border. There are 3 types of borders you can use: dashed, dotted, or solid. I'm going to use a solid border at first. Don't forget your semicolon. Let's save our code, refresh our page, and now we have a solid yellow border that is 10 pixels in weight on our page. Now let's try another combination. Instead of doing 10 pixels, let's do 25 pixels. And instead of doing a solid line, let's do a dashed line. Save, refresh, and now not only is our border a bigger weight, but it is also dashed instead of solid. Now, you may be asking me, Mr. Holmes-Williams, what if I can't remember all of this? Well, that is why we provided you all with certain CSS and HTML resources. So, for example, if I go to my CSS resources page, scroll down, and we go to the properties list, you can see from A to Z all the different properties you can use within your CSS page. So, for example, I just used border. So if I go to border right here, you can see exactly what you can do within the border property. And there's more things you can do that I have not shown you. But of course, I've shown you the ones that you're probably going to use the most, which is your width, your style, and your color. Okay, so you can, if you wanted to, separate out these different properties into the 3 separate ones, or you can just simply use border and then list them the way that we did. And in this case, order does not matter, so you can switch the order to your preference. And that is a quick example of inline CSS. So let's go back to our home page. Now, the problem with inline CSS is that it really is best used as a spot treatment, because could you imagine having to do this for every single line of code inside of your HTML document? It would be very exhausting and highly inefficient. So that's where we bring in our lovely friend, external CSS, to help us out quite a bit. So your external style sheet is actually inside of your file. So if you pull your files out, right under our index.html page, we have a style.css page. And we have already pre-populated some of the CSS selectors here for you to stylize. But first, we need to add a link to this page. So before you style your page using an external style sheet, you need to make sure that you properly link that style sheet to the HTML pages that you want the styling to apply to. So if you go up to the index.html page, and I want you to scroll down to line number 22, you can see that we've already pre-populated the link element, which is how we link external style sheets to our HTML page. We've already given you 2 of the necessary attributes needed to do this. The first attribute is the relationship attribute, which is just REL. And of course, relationship to this page that we're trying to link is the style sheet. And then we have also inserted href, which we've seen plenty of times with all of our lovely anchor or hyperlink tags. So now it says fill in the style sheet. So of course, using your good file management, you know that since the style.css sheet is on the same level as our index.html sheet, we just take out this text and we simply put in between the quotation style.css. All right. And now let's also link to our style sheet our other HTML sheets at the bottom under the subpages folder, our CSS resources page and our HTML resources page. So going to the CSS resources page on line 22, you also need to fill this in. But remember, since this is in a folder, we have to do a little bit more work to get to our style sheet. So to get out of the subpages folder, we do .. Now that we're out of that subpages folder, now we can simply call style.css. Okay, so we just linked both the index.html and the CSS resources page to our external style sheet. Now let's go to our HTML resources page and let's go to line 22. And instead of us giving you the code, we want you to write it yourself. So of course, we're going to do our less than symbol, link, space, REL equals something in quotes. And of course, our something in quotes is going to be style sheet, since this is the relationship to this HTML document. Then we're going to do a space, href equals something in quotes. The something in quotes here will be, of course, the link or the file link to our style.css sheet, which is the same thing as our previous HTML sheet, which is our CSS resources. So we're going to do .. style.css. And then finally, since this is a self-closing tag, right? We just simply put in our closing greater than symbol, and now we have successfully linked our style.css page right here to all three of our HTML documents. So anytime we stylize any of the elements that each of these pages have, we will then see those style changes reflected on the pages. So now let's talk about our style sheet. So essentially how you use external style sheet is very similarly to how you use inline. However, in this case, we have what we call selectors. So instead of just putting the code in an attribute inline like you would in inline CSS, you will simply say, hey, I want to stylize all the header elements within my document. So I'm going to use header as my selector. And then you do an opening bracket, and then you do a closing bracket. Okay, same thing with nav, right? Nav, we want to stylize all the nav elements on our HTML page. So we just use nav as a selector. Aside is the same thing all the way down to the bottom. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. And we can see some of the ways in which we differentiate these different sections, these different semantic elements, by giving them distinctive styles. So I'm going to add a border and a background color to each of these different semantic elements that hold all types of code in them. So for my header, I'm going to do background dash color, and I'm going to make this red. And then I'm going to give it a border, and I'm going to make this simple for now. We're going to do black 5px solid. All right, so now we're going to work smarter, not harder. We're going to copy this code, and now we're going to apply it to each one of the selectors we've given you. So give it to the nav, to the aside, to the main, to the section, and to the footer. Okay, and so now let's change up a couple things. So my nav, I want it to be, actually let me go to the CSS color names. I want it to be a green, but I want it to be a special green. So let's use, deep sea green. That sounds like a fun one. So let's go and use deep sea green, right? We could just copy the name, and let's make the border of this yellow. No, pink. Why not? Our side, I want it to be a nice blue, but instead of using a regular blue, I'm going to use cornflower blue, which if you look on your color names, it is somewhere here, right here, cornflower blue. Okay, and then we're going to change this to a dashed line, and I'm going to make this purple, because why not? Now our main, I'm going to make a simple teal. I'm going to keep the border the same. Our section, I'm going to make that, I want to make it what color? Let me get some exploration. Let's make it a coral. That sounds like a fun color. So again, you can either get the name or you can get the hex color. They both point to the same color. And you can see the preview of what the color looks like right here on this page, which is why we gave it to you. Coral, and we're going to make our border for the coral one. What's a nice complementary color to coral? Let's do... I like this fuchsia. Let's do fuchsia. This one I look the best, but you can just see how you can customize your website. And then finally for our footer, I'm going to do a nice yellow, and I'm going to do a nice green. And instead of making this 5 pixels, I'm going to make this 15 pixels. So we've just stylized every single one of our semantic elements on our page. And now when you save it and you refresh your page, not that, you can see how everything has now transformed. Every single one of our sections has a border and a background color. And like I said before, we did not put any of our code outside of these predefined semantic element sections. And so we have full color throughout our entire web page. Now, you might be asking, Mr. Holmes-Williams, please tell me, where can I find more information about the semantic element stuff you're talking about? Well, if you go to your HTML resources page, which, as you can see, since we linked it to the same style sheet, has the same exact styling as our first page, which you want, some consistency. If you go down to the bottom, our 7th bullet point is called HTML semantic info, and this is essentially what we are trying to copy, right? We have our header at the top. We have our nav here, and then we're going to eventually have our side on the side and our footer at the bottom. And if you notice, right, if we go to a very popular website, which we all know, which is Amazon, Amazon follows a very similar way of styling their website. At the top, you have your header, Right below it, your nav. In the middle, you have a whole bunch of stuff, right? You can either say that these on the side, this blank piece is your aside, and at the very bottom, you have your footer. Same thing with your the W3 schools. At the top, you have a header, then below it is a footer, not footer, a navigation bar or a nav. On the side, you have an aside over here to the left, and you have an aside on the right with ads. In the middle, you have a whole bunch of content, and then at the very bottom, once we scroll all the way down past all these colors, we have a footer. So we are not just saying this just to, make you do more work. This is how you design a website that looks and feels like a website, because since all these big websites are using this form factor, we want you all to learn how to make websites that are familiar, that people are familiar with, right? Because when people go to websites, they expect certain things to happen. They expect a nav bar at the top. They expect things in the middle and on the side. And so we want you to know how you can properly do this within your own CSS and HTML website. Okay, so let's go and let's do a couple of stylizing changes. So first off, we want to get this aside right here with all of our lovely CSP teachers, me, Mr. Wynn, and Ms. Calhoun. We want to make sure that it goes to the side like we saw inside of our fully published website. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go down to our aside element, right? Our aside selector, excuse me. And we're going to do this property called float. And the float has two property values. We have left and right. Since we had it on the right on our finished website, we're going to do right as our property value. So now we save it, go back to our website, refresh, and bam. Now it looks very similar to what it looks like over here with a few stylistic changes, right? So now we have another issue. Can you spot it? Of course, the footer has unfortunately been floated to the side of our floated right over here, instead of it being at the bottom like a footer should be, head at the top, foot at the bottom, okay? So the way that you clear or you essentially prevent a float from changing the position of one of your elements is by using the clear property. So again, since we want to change the footer, we simply go to our CSS external style sheet, go down to our footer selector, which affects all the footer elements on our HTML page, and we do clear, colon, and there are three values for clear. You can clear left for float left, clear right for float right, or clear both if you have both things floating onto right and to the left of the element you're trying to clear. In this case, since we are only clearing a floated right, we're going to do clear, colon, right. We're going to save this, go to our page, refresh it, and bam. Now our footer is where it belongs, at the foot of our page. And so this is the gist of the code. Now what I want you to do on your own is I want you to stylize all these sections, right? We've taught you how to change the font color, the background color, add borders, change the size of text, all that good stuff. And we're going to teach you a couple more things, but I really want you all to take what you've learned here and apply it to all the sections on your document. And of course, using your CSS resources page, figure out all the other wonderful, beautiful things that we just cannot fit inside of our shorter class times to figure out what else you can do with CSS. But first, let's go and stylize some P elements. So again, if we want to select all the P elements on our page to stylize, we use the P selector, which is simply the tag name. Since the P element, which gives paragraphs their flair, is P, we just do P, open bracket, and then CodeHS automatically creates your second bracket. In here, we're going to do a couple of stylistic changes. First off, I'm going to make the color of it something that is, I like dark orange. Let's do dark orange. That sounds like a fun color. So I'm going to do color, colon, dark orange. Next, I'm going to do text dash align center, right? And then finally, actually no, second to finally, we're going to do font dash size, and I'm going to make this 32 pixels. Don't forget the pixels, please. Even though the default for font size is pixels, and it will just accept 32 if you put it without the PX, you always want to denote the unit of measurement you're using. So please make sure you get in the habit of using that. And finally, we're going to use a new property called font-family. Now, font family is not as easy as I would want it to be, but essentially, if you look up font family CSS list, a lot of times you will get a list of different font families that you can use within the font family name. And essentially, you want to choose from a list that gives you both the more specialized fonts and the font family's mother or father, or where it goes, its generic name, essentially. So for example, every single font that you have inside of, well, any font you see is coming from one of 5 families. It is either coming from serif, sans serif, monospace, fantasy, or cursive, okay? And so I'm gonna just take this example here. So we have Source Sans Pro, Arial, and then sans serif. I'm gonna copy this, and I'm gonna show you what I mean by this. So if we go back to our page, and we're gonna copy this, take out our semicolon, save this. Now, I want you to look at how our page changes. Well, when we go back to the home page. Actually, no, it also changes here. So you can see here that all the P elements on our website have now changed in font size, font color, and it has also changed within the actual styling of, or the font of the letters. So you can see what our font looks like when it's the default font, and we can see what it looks like now that we've given the font family its name. So you can do a whole bunch of stuff with font family. If you want to learn more, I encourage you to do some research. But essentially, the way you want to do fonts is that the font family, which is always the last family that you put in, the last thing you put in for a font family, will always work. No matter what browser you go on, will it be Chrome or Firefox or Safari or in Explorer, the font families of sans serif, serif, monospace, cursive, and fantasy will always work. However, some of the more specialized fonts within those font families may not always work with the browser. And so essentially, the way that it reads is that your browser will always try to stylize your text with the first font you put in. If it cannot display that font, then it goes to the next font. And then finally, if it can't display either of the other of the many fonts you can have in front of it, you can have as many fonts as you want in front of the font family. But you always end with the font family, because no matter what, that browser will be able to support that base font family. If you do not put in the font family at the end and instead just put in the more specialized versions of that font family, and the browser that your user is accessing your website on does not have a browser that can actually support those, then it will default to the default font of the browser, which if you're stylizing the font of the browser, you probably don't want it to do. So you always end with the font family. And again, there are many resources out there that will just give you all the different combinations of font family you should use, and you just copy and paste it. But if you want to learn more, talk to me or your fellow AP/CSP teacher. And so now we're going to save, and this is our page so far. And again, there are a couple of things you can do, like you can change the width and the height of your different elements. You can, of course, align and center everything else, but that is up for you to figure out on your own. So let this be your playground. And that ends our CSS lesson. Now let's quickly go over and go back to HTML and add in 3 HTML elements, which is the video element, the audio element, and the iframe element. So if you will, go back to your sheet, get out of your style.css sheet, and go to your index.html sheet. Once you are here, I want you to scroll all the way down until you get to around line 72. Depending on what code you put in here, it might be a little lower or a little higher, but essentially you want to go down to where you have these comments that we've inserted for you, and you want to be within the section element. Okay, so you'll see that we didn't have every single thing filled out. It's because there's nothing in this section, and so nothing showed up. But once we add in our content, then some of those stylings that we gave it will then show up. But without any content, it's just as if it's not there. So audio and video is the same exact element, but just audio versus video. So let me show you. First things first, you create an audio element. So you do less than audio, end it with your greater than, and then put a little space in between your 2 audio tags. Then in the middle of your audio tags, you want to add in the source element. Now, you may be thinking, well, didn't we use source for images? Yes, you did. And so there is a source element and there is a source attribute, which is why it's important when you're using nomenclature that you are referring to the one that you're trying to do. Because right now we have both an attribute called source and we have an element called source. So you want to make sure that you're using the right nomenclature. We're going to leave that right there, and we're going to go and get the link to our audio. So the way that CodeHS does this is a little weird. Normally what you would do is, since this is a file within your file system, you go into the media folder. So you do what? Like this, media / and then you do site audio .mp3, right? However, because of how CodeHS does files, instead, when you click on the audio, you just copy this link and it will insert it for you, okay? So again, don't forget your file management system and how you do that, but for now, you just copy and paste this link. Once you have copied and pasted this link, now we're gonna go up to the opening tag of your audio element and we're gonna add in the most necessary, you have to have this attribute, which is called controls. Controls essentially gives you the play and pause button and lets you scrub through your audio. If you do not have this attribute, your audio will not show up. So you need this. Now the next two I'm going to show you are going to be optional. One is called autoplay, which as the name says, autoplays the music once your website has loaded. And then loop, which again, as the name states, it will loop your audio. The last thing you want to do, and you can do this before or after, I'm going to do it after, within your source element, you are going to put in what we call the type attribute, and you're simply going to say what type of audio you have. So you're going to do audio / MP3 because we have an MP3 as our audio file. If it was WMA, you do audio / WMA. If it was any other one, you do that. And this, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between is how you add audio to your site. So when I save this, go over to my site, refresh, go to my main site. You can see the audio, I'm not sure if you can hear it, but it auto plays. And you can see you have your controls. You can go to different places, control the volume, all that good stuff. So now let's add in video. Remember how I said video is the exact same thing, but with video, well, I was not lying. So again, less than, video, greater than, add in your space. In between the video opening and closing tags, we're going to add in the source element, which is, of course, as you can probably tell, is a self-closing element or a self-closing tag, meaning it does not have a closing tag. It just self-closes, right? So if you weren't aware of that, that is what that is. Add in our source attribute and our type attribute. And then we close our source element since it is self-closing. Now, again, like I said before, because of how CodeHS does their files, we can't just go to media, site video. So we go to site video here, we get the link, we copy it, we go back to our HTML code, scroll all the way down, and then we paste that link there. And again, the type, instead of audio, we do video, / and then since this is an MP4, we do MP4. And now again, just like audio, you need controls as an attribute. Okay, it will not show if you don't have controls. And then you can do autoplay, you can do loop, and then there are two additional things you can do that you'll probably want to change, which is width and height. For right now, I'm just going to leave them empty, but you can adjust them to however big or small you want your video to be on your page. And this, again, is how you add in video into your site. So I'm going to save this, go to my page, refresh it, and now my internet's not working. At least not how it's supposed to. But anyways, just pretend like things are playing, but as you can see, it does load up. So it is playing on both ends. And I'm just gonna add in a break element really quickly in between these two so that there's some room so they're on different lines. Don't forget the code that we've done before. Y'all remember break. So now when we refresh our page, now they're on different lines. Okay, last thing we're going to talk about, and it's going to be very quick, is going to be iframe. So we're going to put in a little bit of space here. So iframe is essentially how we embed videos, typically from YouTube or other video sources, into our program or our website. So let's go to YouTube. I spelled that wrong, but it's okay because Google has my back. Go to YouTube, just pick a video of your choice. We're going to go to this Smallville video. We're going to not sit here and look at that. And essentially how you embed videos is you look on a video platform like a YouTube or like a Vimeo or something like that, if you're into that. Go to Share, go to Embed, and then what you want to do is you want to go and copy. This probably wasn't the best video to show. I'm not sure why it's... But anyways, I'm going to choose another one. And there you go. I'm going to go to Share, Embed, Copy, and you see how you have text that is HTML based, right? You have your iframe element, your opening iframe element tag, closing, then you have your width attribute, your height attribute, your SRC attribute. These are all things we've done in the past. So this is nothing new. So we're going to copy that. And we're going to do the painstaking task of pasting. That's it. Save. Refresh your page. And now we have a video.
And like, you know, one of my favorite skits is this
from YouTube directly. And we can even interact with it as if it was YouTube, right? Play another video, etc. Right from within our very humble HTML and CSS website. And so that is how you insert multimedia such as video, audio, and iframes from YouTube into your HTML code. And this is how you add CSS styling to your page. Happy web designing, AP CSP students. Thank you.